episode of Jess Reads Fairy Tales. Today we are, as I said on Twitter, so if you're here, you probably saw my little announcement on Twitter. We are going to be reading The Blue Light from Grimm's Fairy Tales. So without further ado, let's get started. A soldier had served the king faithfully for many years, but when the war came to an end, he could serve no longer because of the many wounds he had received. The king said to him, "You may return to your home. I need you no longer, and you will not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day, until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light, which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me one night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh ho!" she answered, "who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet I will be compassionate and take you in, if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you shall dig all around my garden for me tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood and make it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed he should stay one night more. "Tomorrow you shall do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house there is an old dry well, in which my light has fallen. It burns blue and never goes out. You shall bring it up again for me." Next day the old woman took him to the well, and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light, and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, but when he came near the edge she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention, "I will not give you the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him down again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury onto the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning. But what use was that to him? He saw very well that he could not escape death. He sat for a while, very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket, and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," he thought, pulled it out, lit it at the blue light, and began to smoke. When the smoke had circled about the cavern, suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him, and said, "Lord, what are your commands?" "What commands have I to give you?" replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything you bid me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier. "Then in the first place help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand, and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch and carry her before the judge." In a short time she, with frightful cries, came riding by, as swift as the wind on a wild tomcat. Nor was it long after that before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows. What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. "At this moment none," answered the soldier. "You can return home, only be at hand immediately if I summon you." "Nothing more is needed than that you should light your pipe at the blue light, and I shall appear before you at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he had come. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsomely as possible. When it was ready and the soldier had taken possession of it, He summoned the little black mannequin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge." "What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep. She shall do servant's work for me." The mannequin said, "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you, for if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannequin carried in the princess. "Aha! There you are!" cried the soldier. "Get to your work at once. Fetch this broom and sweep the chamber." When she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair, and then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots for me." And then he threw them in her face and made her pick them up again and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, and without opposition, silently, and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannequin carried her back to the royal palace and laid her in her bed. Next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room, and I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. It was only a dream, and yet I am just as tired as if I had really done everything." "That dream may have been true," said the king. "I will give you a piece of advice. Fill your pocket full of peas and make a small hole in it, and then if you are carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets." But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night, when the sleeping princess was again carried through the streets, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cock-crow. Next morning the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain, for in every street poor children were sitting, picking up peas and saying, "It must have rained peas last night." "We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep your shoes on, and when you go to bed, and before you come back from the place where you are taken, hide one of them there. I will contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night, when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house, it would go badly with him. "Do as I bid you," replied the soldier, and again this third time the princess was obliged to work like a servant, but before she went away she hid her shoe under the bed. The next morning the king had the entire town search for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who at the entreaty of the dwarf had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now, loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I've left lying at the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone again, he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wherever they take you, and let them do what they will. Only take the blue light with you." The next day the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke one more pipe on my way." "You may smoke 3," answered the king, "but do not imagine I will spare your life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command?" Strike down to the earth that false judge there, and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the manikin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and the princess to wife. The end. So I have a lot of thoughts on this story, but first, this is a pretty common type of story. You might have noticed with the whole fetch me the light, it's very similar to Aladdin and fetch me the lamp. This is a common fairy tale type that's called the Aarne-Thompson-Uther Type 562. There are these types of fairy tales that are basically, I'll put them in the chat, but that are all sorted by type. And this is basically, there's a bunch in there in the link that I just put, where they all involve a soldier being fired by a king, getting something. It's usually a light, sometimes it's a djinn or a genie. And in the version that I grew up with, it's a tinderbox with 3 dogs. So I loved this story when I was growing up because I loved dogs, and I had a really beautiful illustration in my Hans Christian Andersen book with some lovely dogs. Reading it as an adult, none of the princesses in any of the versions have agency, and in some of the earlier versions, it's not housework that he invites her to do. A lot of times they don't get quite explicit, but they do involve him asking the dwarf or the djinn to bring him the princess to sleep in his bed or to sleep beside him. And then the dwarf takes her back the next day. And the whole time in every version, the soldier is seen as the good guy. Like Grimm, the Brothers Grimm even said he'd done nothing wrong, yet was sentenced to death. When 3 times he's kidnapped a woman and at least forced her to clean, if not more. And then he wins. And in some versions, he kills the king. So when I wrote my adventure based on the blue light for Grim Encounters 3, it's basically an after version of this, because if you're the princess in this story, this has to be so horrifying for you. You're abducted 3 times. Then you see a magic creature murder a bunch of people that you might know or at least be familiar with, like a judge and other courtiers, and then nearly kill your father or possibly kill your father. And then you're married to the person who is controlling the murderous creature. And a lot of them end with, and they live happily ever after. But I'm not really sure how. The moral seems to be pay your veterans, which is something I can wholeheartedly get behind. But at the end of the day, the prince, or not the prince, the soldier is just as bad, if not worse than the king. Like he never does anything that is good in any of this. The witch is bad because she's making him work longer than he needs to. But then he has her killed just for being a witch because he sees it in her eyes, which gets into a whole lot of different tropes that I don't want to touch on right now with the anti-Semitic history of the Brothers Grimm and all of the stuff in them. If you want to see more on that, check out The Jew in the Thorn Bush, but that has a big content warning on it, so be careful with that one. But there's a whole history of this kind of thing, and yeah, she dies basically for, not giving him what he wants. In some of the versions, it's more explicit that she leaves him there to die, sort of like Jafar and Aladdin. But our soldier is not a redeemable guy in here. And I'm not sure if he was back then. It certainly seems like he was. The narrative explicitly states that he is. He is the hero. He's the one that the black dwarf or mannequin or genie or djinn works for. But I personally think it's a pretty sad story that he wins in the end. And I hope it. I don't really know why I read this. I wanted to give you all something to think of and to give you maybe some of the background of what Aladdin is based on. Some people say this is what Aladdin is based on, not the Grimm version, obviously, but the root tale. It's definitely what Hans Christian Andersen's The Tinderbox is based on. And there's a whole bunch of weird stories like this across all cultures of veterans not getting paid